On Saturday, January 17, 2026, Minneapolis entered another tense chapter in a week already defined by immigration enforcement, protests, and rising political confrontation. By early afternoon, the city was preparing for dueling demonstrations near City Hall, as federal immigration operations continued to keep the area on edge. What unfolded over the next several hours would not only test the city's patience, but also reveal how fragile the situation had become. This moment did not come out of nowhere. Nearly 10 days earlier, on January 7th, a fatal shooting involving a federal immigration officer had shaken Minneapolis and ignited days of unrest. Since then, the city had been living in a state of uncertainty, with protests, vigils, and heavy law enforcement presence becoming part of daily life. If you're trying to understand how tensions reached this point, stay with this story because the details matter. By Saturday morning, law enforcement officials were already preparing for possible clashes. Minneapolis police confirmed they were monitoring planned demonstrations scheduled to begin around 1 p.m. local time near City Hall. Officers in tactical gear were seen moving into the downtown area ahead of the rallies, while state officials confirmed the Minnesota National Guard had been placed on standby. The planned rally was organized by a right-wing online influencer who had called on supporters to gather in opposition to critics of immigration enforcement. His announcement quickly drew backlash and prompted counter-protests from immigration advocates, civil rights groups, and residents who viewed the event as a provocation during an already volatile moment. As the afternoon approached, conditions worsened. Temperatures plunged, with wind chills reported near -4 degrees Fahrenheit. Even so, crowds continued to gather. By shortly before 1 p.m., hundreds of people had assembled downtown, a number that far exceeded the small group of supporters who arrived for the pro-enforcement rally. When the influencer arrived near City Hall just after 1 p.m., he was almost immediately surrounded by counter-protesters. Chants opposing ICE and demanding federal agents leave Minneapolis drowned out any attempt to speak. The situation escalated quickly, and if you're watching closely, this is where the story shifts from protest to confrontation. Objects were thrown. Shoving followed. Video from the scene showed protesters pressing in tightly as the influencer attempted to retreat. Within minutes, the rally had collapsed entirely. He was struck as he tried to leave and was eventually forced to move several blocks away, later taking refuge inside a nearby hotel. The entire event lasted less than half an hour, but its impact was far greater. Counter-protesters remained in the area through mid-afternoon, continuing to chant and demonstrate before gradually dispersing. Police maintained a visible presence but largely avoided direct intervention, a decision that sparked immediate debate about crowd control, free speech, and public safety. As this unfolded, many Minneapolis residents were asking the same question. How did the city get here? To understand that, it's important to look beyond the rally itself. In the days leading up to January 17th, residents across Minneapolis reported increased immigration enforcement activity. Federal officials said the operations were part of an investigation into immigration and welfare fraud. But for many in the community, the effect was fear and disruption. People avoided leaving their homes. Parents kept children out of school. Small businesses reported fewer customers. Advocacy groups said the enforcement actions were affecting people far beyond those actually targeted, creating a climate of anxiety across entire neighborhoods. Federal authorities defended the operations, insisting they were lawful and focused on serious offenses. Critics argued the tactics were excessive, especially in the wake of the January 7th shooting. That shooting became a symbol for many protesters, fueling anger and mistrust toward federal agencies. As protests continued throughout the week, city leaders faced growing pressure. Minneapolis officials expressed support for peaceful demonstrations while acknowledging they had limited control over federal actions. Statements calling for calm did little to slow the momentum building towards Saturday's rally. Legal developments added another layer of tension. A federal judge issued an order clarifying that immigration agents could not detain or arrest peaceful protesters without evidence of criminal activity. Civil rights advocates praised the ruling, while federal officials warned it could complicate enforcement efforts. By the time night fell on January 17th, Minneapolis was still on alert. Although large-scale violence was avoided, the confrontations underscored how deeply divided the city had become. The rally and counter-protest were not isolated incidents, but reflections of a broader national struggle over immigration, authority, and civil liberties. And this is where the story becomes bigger than Minneapolis. What happened on January 17th raised questions being asked across the country. How far should federal enforcement go? Where is the line between protest and intimidation? And who ultimately decides how these conflicts are resolved? If you've made it this far, you're clearly trying to understand more than just the headlines. Take a moment to pause and think about what you've heard so far. And if you have an opinion, share it in the comments. Do you believe the protests were justified? Or did they cross a line? Do you think federal authorities handled the situation appropriately? As the weekend continued, law enforcement remained vigilant, community groups called for dialogue, and federal investigations into local responses were ongoing. No clear resolution was in sight. What was clear was that trust between authorities and parts of the community had eroded, and rebuilding it would not be easy. Nearly 10 days after the January 7th shooting, Minneapolis was still grappling with its aftermath. The events of January 17th did not bring closure. Instead, they added another chapter to an ongoing story that continues to evolve. Stories like this don't end when the crowds leave. They shape policy, influence elections, and define how communities see themselves and their government. If you want to keep following how this unfolds, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps support in-depth reporting like this and ensures you don't miss the next update. And before you go, let us know in the comments where you stand. Your perspective is part of this story too.